The scary truth about reheating leftovers that nobody talks about. Picture this. You're being practical. You're saving money, cutting down on waste, doing everything a sensible home cook is supposed to do. You reheat last night's dinner, sit down and eat it without a second thought. And somewhere deep inside your body, a slow, silent process is quietly getting worse. Sounds dramatic? I know. But stay with me, because this is not a horror story, it's chemistry. And chemistry doesn't care whether you believe it or not. The habit. Nobody questions. Hundreds of millions of people do it every single week. They open the fridge, pull out yesterday's leftovers, hit the microwave button, and go about their day. Completely unaware that for 4 specific foods, that second round of heat isn't warming up a meal. It's transforming it into something the body was never designed to handle repeatedly. My name is Dr. James, and I've spent years sitting across from patients who received a diagnosis that changed everything, and who looked at me and asked the same question over and over. Why did nobody warn me about this sooner? I'm done staying quiet about it. Here's the uncomfortable part. The cancer most tightly linked to this process is pancreatic cancer, a disease with a 5-year survival rate of roughly 12%. Not because doctors aren't smart enough, not because medicine hasn't tried, but because the pancreas gives you no warning whatsoever. No pain, no swelling, no red flag while the damage quietly stacks up over years. By the time someone notices the back pain, the jaundice, the sudden unexplained weight loss, the disease has usually already been developing for a long time. Let that number sink in. 12%. That is not a disease that gives you a second chance once it announces itself. That is a disease where prevention isn't just the best strategy. It's essentially the only strategy that consistently works. And some of what feeds that prevention is sitting in your refrigerator right now, waiting to be reheated for tomorrow's lunch. First, a little chemistry. I promise it's worth it. When you cook food for the first time, natural reactions happen. Proteins and sugars interact under heat. Fats begin to oxidize. Nitrogen-based compounds meet amino acids. In most cases, your body handles the resulting compounds just fine. There are antioxidants present, biological buffers in place, and the amounts are manageable. But the second time you apply heat, the rules change entirely. Those protective antioxidants, already degraded from the first cook. The buffers, gone. Meanwhile, during cooling and storage, bacteria have been quietly at work, converting compounds in your food, particularly nitrates in vegetables, into more reactive and far more troublesome forms. When heat hits those forms a second time, it drives them forward into something called nitroso compounds, more commonly known as nitrosamines. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified nitrosamines as probable human carcinogens. Animal studies point specifically to pancreatic involvement. This isn't scaremongering dressed up in scientific language. It's documented, peer-reviewed, and unfortunately not something that gets taught in any kitchen anywhere in the world. Now let's get specific, because Dr. James wants you walking away from this with 4 concrete things you can change this week. Not fear, but information. Food number 1, processed meat. Hot dogs, sausages, bacon, ham, deli cuts. Anything cured, smoked, or preserved with nitrates and nitrites. Here's the thing most people miss. These foods already contain nitrosamines before they even reach your kitchen. The preservatives used during manufacturing react with the amines naturally found in meat protein, and that reaction produces carcinogens during the processing itself. You're not starting from a neutral place when you reheat them. You're starting from a place that's already chemically loaded. Then you apply heat again. At high temperature, maybe in a frying pan, maybe in the microwave. Heat accelerates nitrosamine formation. The higher the temperature, the longer the exposure, the more those compounds multiply and concentrate. Research examining dietary nitroso compounds and pancreatic cancer risk has found that high dietary intake of these compounds is associated with elevated pancreatic cancer risk. Studies have also identified heterocyclic amines, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and nitroso compounds produced during high-temperature cooking as key mutagens, the kind that interfere directly with healthy cell function. And here's something Dr. James wants to be honest about. This isn't about telling you to never enjoy a sausage again. Food is one of life's genuine pleasures, and nobody benefits from living in fear of their own fridge. The issue is repetition. It's the weekly reheating of processed meats, the daily microwaved bacon, the leftover ham that gets nuked on high 3 days running. That accumulation is where the risk lives. The practical takeaway: eat processed meats once, fresh, prepared once. Don't reheat yesterday's leftover sausage on high. That's not being wasteful, that's being smart. Food number 2, spinach and other leafy greens. This is the one that genuinely stops people in their tracks, because you're reaching for spinach because it's healthy. The nutrition advice you've received for decades is correct. Spinach is legitimately excellent. Iron, folate, vitamins, antioxidants. All real, all genuinely valuable. And then you reheat the leftovers from dinner and quietly undo a meaningful portion of that benefit, while simultaneously triggering the exact chemical pathway you were trying to avoid. There's a frustrating irony in that, and I think people deserve to know about it. Here's what happens. Fresh spinach contains naturally occurring nitrates, completely harmless in their original form, and actually beneficial for blood pressure and cardiovascular function when eaten raw or freshly cooked. But once you cook spinach and let it sit, even in the refrigerator, bacterial activity and enzymatic reactions within the cooked vegetable begin converting those nitrates into nitrites. The longer it sits, the more nitrite accumulates. A study published in the journal Food specifically warned against storing boiled spinach for more than 12 hours at room temperature, precisely because of this direct nitrate to nitrosamine conversion pathway. When you reheat it, 2 things happen simultaneously. Heat drives further nitrite formation, and it also drives a reaction between those nitrites and the amino acids present in the spinach, producing nitrosamines. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer has confirmed that nitrosamines in food are established carcinogens linked to gastrointestinal and pancreatic cancers. The same principle applies to other high-nitrate vegetables: celery, beetroot, kale, and carrots. Celery in particular contains extraordinarily high nitrate concentrations. Soups and stews made with celery, reheated repeatedly throughout the week as happens constantly in home cooking, go through this conversion cycle with every single reheat. Each time you warm that pot up again, you're nudging the chemistry further in the wrong direction. The irony, as Dr. James often tells patients, is precise and almost painful. The vegetable you're reheating specifically because it's healthy is chemically transforming into something that works against the very protection it was supposed to provide. The practical takeaway: cook leafy greens fresh in the quantity you'll eat right away. If you have leftover cooked spinach, eat it cold in a salad the next day. Cold does not drive the nitrosamine forming reaction. Heat does. It really is that simple. Food as number 3, cooking oils and anything fried in them. Most people have a vague sense that reusing cooking oil isn't ideal. What most people don't understand is the specific chemistry of why and how that chemistry connects to cancer risk. When a polyunsaturated oil, sunflower, corn, soybean, canola, is heated to cooking temperature, a process called lipid peroxidation begins. The double bonds in polyunsaturated fatty acids react with oxygen and heat to produce a cascade of oxidized compounds: aldehydes, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and acrylamide in the presence of starchy foods. These compounds are genotoxic, meaning they cause direct damage to DNA at the cellular level, not indirectly, not over a chain of reactions. They go straight for the genetic material. When that oil is reheated, or when food cooked in it is reheated, the oxidation process picks up exactly where it left off. The smoke point of the oil, the temperature at which it begins to visibly break down, actually lowers with each use. That means the oil reaches its toxic breakdown threshold faster and at lower temperatures with every reheating cycle. The concentration of harmful compounds climbs each time. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified several of the primary compounds produced by repeated oil heating, including acrylamide and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, as probable human carcinogens. Here's the specific problem with reheating fried food in a microwave that Dr. James wants to highlight, because it's something most people have never considered. The surface temperature becomes deeply uneven. Some areas of the food get scorched at very high temperatures, while others barely warm up at all. Those scorched spots produce the highest concentrations of all three compound classes: HCAs, PAHs, and acrylamide. And that scorching can happen at a microscopic level that produces no visible browning. You won't see it, you won't taste it. But it's there, and it's accumulating. The practical takeaway: don't reheat fried foods. Eat them once fresh, immediately after cooking. If you absolutely must reheat, use an oven at a moderate, even temperature rather than a microwave, and discard frying oil after one use, every single time. Food number 4, rice. This one works differently from the others, and the distinction matters. The risk from reheated rice isn't primarily about carcinogenic compounds forming during the reheat itself. It's about something arguably more immediate: a heat-resistant bacterial toxin that reheating doesn't destroy and that over long-term repeated exposure contributes to chronic intestinal inflammation. And chronic intestinal inflammation is one of the most extensively documented pathways to gastrointestinal cancers in all of modern medicine. Here's the mechanism. When cooked rice sits at room temperature, a bacterium called Bacillus cereus begins to multiply. Its spores survive the original boiling process entirely, and they simply lie dormant in the cooked grain, waiting. As the rice cools and sits, those spores activate. The bacteria begin producing 2 types of toxins, one that causes vomiting within hours, and one that causes diarrhea, produced specifically during the storage phase rather than after reheating. Here's the part that surprises almost everyone, including many people in healthcare. When you reheat the rice, you do kill the bacteria. But the toxins they've already left behind are heat stable. They survive the microwave. They survive the stovetop. The bacteria are gone, but the toxins remain in the food, and you eat them. In the short term, that means nausea, stomach cramping, vomiting, and diarrhea. Unpleasant, but survivable. In the long term, and this is the connection most people never hear about, repeated low-level exposure to these toxins from improperly stored and reheated rice contributes to chronic intestinal inflammation. Every irritation leaves microscopic damage to the intestinal lining. Over years and decades of weekly exposure, that accumulated damage creates exactly the kind of cellular environment where cancer quietly finds its footing. The connection between chronic intestinal inflammation and gastrointestinal cancers is not hypothetical. It is one of the most replicated findings in cancer epidemiology. Dr. James has seen it in the literature, and he's seen it in patients. The practical takeaway: after cooking, cool rice quickly, within 1 hour, and refrigerate it immediately. Store it for no more than 24 hours. Reheat it once only, ensuring it reaches steaming hot throughout. Not just lukewarm in the middle, but genuinely hot all the way through. Cook smaller batches so there's less leftover in the first place. The time saved by cooking in large batches is genuinely not worth the cumulative risk of weekly bacterial toxin exposure across decades. So, what does this actually change? Let's be clear. None of this asks you to upend your entire relationship with food. Dr. James isn't here to make you anxious every time you open the refrigerator door. You don't need to throw away everything you enjoy. You don't need a new diet, a new lifestyle, or a new kitchen. You need 4 specific habit adjustments. Don't reheat processed meats at high temperature. Eat them once fresh. Eat cooked leafy greens cold the next day rather than reheating them. Discard used cooking oil after one use and don't reheat fried foods. Cool rice within 1 hour, refrigerate it, and reheat it once only, all the way to steaming hot throughout. 4 changes. Applied consistently to your weekly kitchen routine. That's genuinely it. These aren't extreme measures. They're not inconvenient lifestyle overhauls. They're small, deliberate shifts that meaningfully reduce your exposure to the specific class of compounds that cancer researchers and oncologists connect to some of the deadliest, hardest to detect cancers in modern medicine. The ones that give you no warning. The ones where prevention is the only reliable strategy. Your kitchen was never designed to come with a warning label, but now, in a very real sense, it does. A final word from Dr. James. Everything shared here is grounded in published biochemistry, food science research, and the documented work of international cancer research organizations. This is educational information, not personal medical advice tailored to your individual situation. Cancer is complex. Individual risk depends on genetics, lifestyle, environment, and many other factors that vary from person to person. The connection between dietary carcinogens and cancer risk is well established in the research literature, but that doesn't mean every person who has ever reheated spinach is in immediate danger. What it does mean is that small, repeated habits accumulate over decades, and some of those habits are worth changing. If you have concerns about your diet and cancer risk, please have that conversation with your own physician, who knows your personal history, your family background, and your full picture. But the chemistry is real. The research is real, and you deserve to know about it. The foods we haven't talked about yet. Most people, after hearing about those 4 foods, assume that's the full picture. That if they just avoid reheating processed meat, spinach, fried foods, and rice, they've essentially covered their bases and can breathe easy. Not quite. Because the truth is, the chemistry we've been discussing, nitrosamine formation, lipid peroxidation, bacterial toxin accumulation, doesn't stop at 4 foods. It runs through several other things sitting in your kitchen right now that most people reheat without a second thought, every single week. Dr. James wants to be clear, this isn't about creating a list so long that eating becomes an exercise in anxiety. It's about understanding the principle well enough that you can apply it yourself, intelligently to your own kitchen habits. Give a person a fish and all that. So, let's keep going. The problem with reheated eggs are one of the most nutritionally complete foods on the planet. High-quality protein, healthy fats, vitamins B12 and D choline, genuinely excellent. Scrambled eggs, boiled eggs, omelets. Millions of people cook a batch in the morning and then reheat the leftovers later in the day or the following morning. Here's what happens when you do that. Egg protein is particularly sensitive to heat. The first time you cook an egg, the proteins denature, they unfold and restructure in a way that makes them digestible and nutritious. When you reheat that cooked egg, those already denatured proteins are subjected to a second round of structural change. The result is not just a rubbery texture, which most people notice, but a meaningful reduction in protein digestibility and bioavailability. You're eating the same egg but absorbing significantly less of its nutritional value. More importantly, reheated eggs, particularly when reheated at high temperatures in a microwave, have been found to produce oxidized cholesterol compounds. Dietary oxidized cholesterol, also called oxysterols, has attracted serious attention in cardiovascular and cancer research. Unlike regular dietary cholesterol, which the body processes relatively well, oxysterols are pro-inflammatory and have been linked in research to damage of arterial walls, disruption of cellular membranes, and here's the connection that ties back to our earlier discussion: promotion of the same inflammatory environment in which cancer development becomes more likely over time. The practical message is simple. Cook eggs fresh. They take 3 minutes. The convenience of reheating a pre-cooked egg is genuinely not worth what you lose, both nutritionally and chemically, in the process. Reheated potatoes. A surprisingly complex story. Potatoes seem harmless. Starchy, filling, versatile, and in many ways they are. But reheated potatoes carry 2 distinct concerns that most people have never been told about. The first is acrylamide. When starchy foods like potatoes are cooked at high temperatures, roasting, frying, baking, a chemical reaction between the amino acid asparagine and naturally occurring sugars in the potato produces acrylamide. We mentioned this compound earlier in the context of cooking oils, and it belongs here too. Acrylamide is classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a probable human carcinogen, with evidence pointing particularly to kidney, endometrial, and ovarian cancer risk from long-term dietary exposure. When roasted or fried potatoes are reheated, particularly in a microwave or oven at high temperature, acrylamide formation continues from where the first cook left off. Every additional heating cycle drives the reaction further. The darker and crispier the surface of the potato becomes during reheating, the higher the acrylamide concentration in those browned areas. The second concern with reheated potatoes is less dramatic but worth understanding. When cooked potatoes are cooled and then reheated, a portion of the digestible starch converts into what's called resistant starch, a form that bypasses digestion in the small intestine and ferments in the large intestine instead. For most people, this is actually a modest benefit for gut microbiome health. But for individuals with existing gut inflammation or compromised intestinal lining, exactly the kind of chronic damage we discussed in the rice section, that fermentation process can amplify inflammation rather than soothe it. The practical takeaway: eat roasted or fried potatoes fresh. If you must reheat them, use a moderate oven temperature and avoid pushing them to a dark, crispy surface. Boiled or steamed potatoes are a safer choice for reheating than roasted ones. The habit. Nobody questions. Hundreds of millions of people do it every single week. They open the fridge, pull out yesterday's leftovers, hit the microwave button, and go about their day, completely unaware that for 4 specific foods, that second round of heat isn't warming up a meal. It's transforming it into something the body was never designed to handle repeatedly. My name is Dr. James, and I've spent years sitting across from patients who received a diagnosis that changed everything, and who looked at me and asked the same question over and over. Why did nobody warn me about this sooner? I'm done staying quiet about it. Here's the uncomfortable part. The cancer most tightly linked to this process is pancreatic cancer, a disease with a 5-year survival rate of roughly 12%. Not because doctors aren't smart enough, not because medicine hasn't tried, but because the pancreas gives you no warning whatsoever. No pain, no swelling, no red flag while the damage quietly stacks up over years. By the time someone notices the back pain, the jaundice, the sudden unexplained weight loss, the disease has usually already been developing for a long time. Let that number sink in. 12%. That is not a disease that gives you a second chance once it announces itself. That is a disease where prevention isn't just the best strategy. It's essentially the only strategy that consistently works. And some of what feeds that prevention is sitting in your refrigerator right now, waiting to be reheated for tomorrow's lunch. Before you close this page, one last thing from Dr. James. You made it to the end, and honestly, that tells me something about you. Most people skim. They read the headline, scroll through the bullet points, and move on with their day having changed absolutely nothing. You didn't do that. You stayed. You read the chemistry, you sat with the uncomfortable parts, and you're leaving this with something genuinely useful. Information that most people will go their entire lives without ever encountering.